Good evening and welcome to the Capitol Report on NTD Television. I'm Steve Lance. Coming up, a Democratic senator traveling to El Salvador. This to advocate for the return of a deported Salvadoran national, an alleged MS-13 gang member. How the White House is responding. The Department of Justice suing the state of Maine for not complying with President Trump's executive order on transgender athletes in women's sports. Meanwhile, in a landmark ruling, Britain's highest court defining the term woman as biological. And is there room for cooperation on Social Security? Former Senator Debbie Stabenow will join us following former President Biden's first major public address since leaving office.
This is Capitol Report, live from our global headquarters in our nation's capital. Here's Steve Lance.
The government of El Salvador has denied Democratic Senator Van Hollen's request to meet with the Salvadoran illegal immigrant deported by the Trump administration. Our Washington correspondent Luis Martinez has more.
They illegally abducted Mr. Abrego Garcia from Maryland and sent him to CCOT, which is a notorious prison here in El Salvador.
That was Senator Chris Van Hollen, the Democrat from Maryland, who traveled to El Salvador this Wednesday to advocate for the return of Kilmer Abrego Garcia, a Salvadorian national who entered the U.S. illegally in 2011 and had previously been arrested in 2019 after being linked to the foreign terrorist organization MS-13.
This is just human decency. Return the guy to America. Let him go through whatever due process he deserves, but stop insisting on this egregious unconstitutional behavior.
Democratic lawmakers have come out in support of the return of Abrego Garcia to the United States, arguing that he was deported to El Salvador without due process. Democratic lawmakers do not contest that Abrego Garcia might be subject to deportation to a third country if he returns to the United States, something that Attorney General Pam Bondi has made clear.
He is not coming back to our country. President Bukele said he was not sending him back. That's the end of the story. If he wanted to send him back, we would give him a plane ride back. There was no situation ever where he was going to stay in this country. None. But he's from El Salvador, he's in El Salvador, and that's where the president plans on keeping him.
Congressman Andy Harris, the chairman of the House Freedom Caucus and the only Republican lawmaker from Maryland, was critical of Senator Van Hollen for using taxpayer money to advocate for a foreign national. Reporting from Washington, D.C., Luis Eduardo Martinez, NTD News.
And as the Trump administration denounces efforts to bring back Kilmer Garcia, the White House bringing Patty Morin, whose daughter was killed by an illegal immigrant in Maryland, to today's press briefing. Joining us now live with more on this is NTD's White House correspondent Iris Tao. Good evening, Iris. Great to have you. So what was the White House's message today?
Good evening to you as well, Steve. As Democrats today are trying to bring back Kilmer Abrego Garcia and highlight that case, the Trump administration is trying to push back against such narratives that he should be brought back as an illegal immigrant by highlighting another case of a mom of 5 being killed by an illegal immigrant also in Maryland. And that illegal immigrant is actually also from El Salvador. During the White House press briefing today, the press secretary brought in Patty Morin, who is the mom of the mom killed in the incident. And she recounted horrifying details of the killing to us. Watch.
Still stained with her blood. He used them to hammer her head against those rocks. They say at least 20 times. This person took my daughter so violently and so gruesomely and so graphically that they sealed the pictures, because I don't want my granddaughters to see these pictures. These are the kind of criminals President Trump wants to remove from our country.
Rachel Morin, who was murdered back in 2023, left behind 5 children, and Victor Martinez Hernandez was found guilty of the murder on Monday. And prosecutors say he grabbed Rachel Morin off the trail, bashed her head against nearby rocks, raped her and concealed her body in a drainage culvert. And President Trump has cited the case several times during his 2024 campaign. And just recently, he criticized the media for focusing more on what he called the so-called Maryland father, who is actually an MS-13 gang member, rather than this Maryland mom. And this afternoon, President Trump met with Patty Moran and had this moment in the Oval Office. Watch.
Beautiful.
Tell a dear friend.
She's a beautiful woman. She's been through hell. Your daughter's looking down proud of you. You know that. Just keep it going.
And Patty Moran in the briefing room today told us that she doesn't care about politics, but she also wouldn't understand why a senator would use taxpayer money to go all the way to El Salvador to bring back someone who's not supposed to be in this country and who she says has more right, seemingly, than her daughter.
I don't care about politics. It's just common sense. Why are we not protecting our children? Bring back someone that's not even an American citizen. Why does that person have more right than I do, or my daughter, or my grandchildren?
And the White House press secretary today also pushed back against efforts to bring back Kilmar Abrego Garcia by highlighting new details reviewed in court filings about his arrest, including, for example, she says when Kilmar Abrego Garcia was arrested, he was found with rolls of cash on him. He had a known symbol of the MS-13 gang, was arrested with two other well-known members of the gang, and that two separate judges found him to be a member of MS-13 without disputes. And meanwhile, just this morning, she asked that it was reviewed through Maryland court documents that Abrego Garcia's wife petitioned for an order of protection against him for 2 instances back in 2021 over domestic violence. Here's what the press secretary told us. Watch.
Not only are Democrats rushing to defend an illegal criminal foreign terrorist gang member, but also an apparent woman beater. And if he ever ends up back in the United States, he would immediately be deported again.
The wife of Kilmar Abrego Garcia, meanwhile, today responded to the Trump administration, revealing her previous court filing, saying that they were actually able to work through that situation and that their marriage got only stronger after that, adding that that should not be a justification for ICE's deportation of Kilmar Abrego Garcia to a country that he's supposed to be protected from deportation. But the White House today also made clear to us that, quote, nothing will change the fact that Abrego Garcia will never be a Maryland father. He will never live in the United States of America again. Steve.
NTD's Iris Tao live in front of the West Wing of the White House. Thank you, Iris. And a court is demanding more information on efforts to return Kilmar Abrego Garcia, this after his deportation to El Salvador. Could he be sent to a third country instead if he were to come back? We're now joined by former acting ICE Director John Torres. John Torres, thank you so much for joining us.
Great to be here, Steve. Thank you.
It's great to have you with us, John. So a U.S. judge is now ordering officials to produce documents and testify under oath regarding efforts to return Kilmar Abrego Garcia. That's the deported man from El Salvador. John, what do you make of this order, and is it ultimately a reasonable request?
Well, it's most interesting from the aspect that the judge has also said that she's not ready at this point to find people in contempt of court. Normally, that's the big threat. You're going to testify before my court, and if you don't produce these documents or tell us what you've been doing, we're going to throw you in jail. And so ultimately what we're seeing here is they're trying to find more information. It sounds as if the judge does not believe that the Trump administration officials, both at Department of Justice and Department of Homeland Security, are doing enough in her eyes. You know, is it fair? I'd also take a look from the aspect that as an ICE agent and a former head of ICE, it's not so easy to just demand that a foreign national be returned from a foreign government. You can make a request, you can ask that they send that person back, but ultimately the person that was deported here, that was sent to El Salvador, is a citizen and national of El Salvador, and it's really up to their government to abide by that request. So really what we're talking about here is a showdown between the executive branch and the judicial branch. And the executive branch, the president has said that he alone has the ability to conduct foreign policy and not individual judges across the country. So I see this continuing to play out in the courts here.
John, you were the head of ICE. You ran that agency for a while. Obviously, optics, as the boss of that agency, you were probably very privy to it, watching media, seeing how everybody was reacting to it. What you're seeing right now with regard to reporting from mainstream media outlets about this man being a Maryland man, leaving out and omitting a lot of the facts about how he came to this country and his actual status, is this something new to you, or did you experience similar things back when you were in charge of ICE?
I experienced that throughout my entire career. I've seen the agency enforce the law during times of a more aggressive posture, especially under President George W. Bush during the Secure Border Initiative. And immediately, as soon as the agency started becoming effective in carrying out its duties and enforcing immigration law, you would see many stories come out that had incorrect facts. They also would easily leave out significant details. They would ignore the fact that the person even crossed the border illegally, which is a violation under Title 8 USC 1325. So that's a misdemeanor crime alone by itself. But quite frankly, when you have millions of people crossing the border illegally, you're not going to prosecute all those. The government doesn't have the resources to prosecute everybody. So then they fall into the civil category of administrative law, deportation law. And so that part gets left out quite often. But there are many other stories that I've experienced where the media would just immediately take a statement from someone saying, well, ICE came into our house, they busted through the floorboards, they rappelled down from helicopters, they sicked the dogs on us. And I think back, ICE didn't have helicopters at that time, and we certainly didn't use canines. But why let the facts get in the way of a good story? And so this is not new to me. We've seen that part of it happen, quite frankly, many times over the years.
Now, we did see in the Oval Office the president of El Salvador reassuring the media that he will not be sending this gentleman back to the United States, this El Salvadorian national. Hypothetically, if he is eventually returned, is it possible that he could be deported to a third country outside of El Salvador? And would that undercut efforts to champion his return?
Yeah, so a judge found him illegally here in the United States. They found him deportable, but also issued a protective order preventing the government from sending him back to El Salvador, because the judge also found that as a member of MS-13, for example, as a member of a gang there from El Salvador, that rival gangs would harm him if the U.S. government sent him back to El Salvador. So in effect, basically saying, because you're a gang member and potentially a criminal here in the United States, we're going to keep you here and protect you and not send you back there. But the protective order doesn't say that you can't send him somewhere else. So ultimately, one of the things we've had to do in the past is try to find a third country to send people back to when we had deportation orders. Because ultimately, ICE only has the authority to detain someone for up to 6 months. And to detain them long, and that's for the purposes of removal. And so technically, yes, if they found another third country, they could send him back to a different country, not El Salvador.
John, zooming out a bit here, obviously the numbers starting to come in. Trump has only been in office less than 3 months. Talk to us about some of the most meaningful changes that you think have taken place on the border to show that these apprehensions are down, illegal crossings are down, and how much of it has to do with not just those policies that you might talk to us about, but also what type of message the deportations are sending to those who may be thinking about crossing?
Sure. So one of the main indicators is the amount of people trying to cross the border that are being arrested. And the Border Patrol has reported their apprehensions along the southwest border are down as high as 95, 97% in some sectors across the border, which is incredible. They say it's the lowest number in recorded history for the number of apprehensions that they've made in many, many years. And so you look at that and it tells me that the deterrence of some of these programs are absolutely working. People don't want to cross the border if they're going to be placed into detention, which was not happening in the last administration. Last administration was allowing people to present themselves at the border and say, I want to file for asylum, knowing that in many cases, as high as 95% of those cases, people weren't eligible for asylum. What they were seeking was economic asylum, not a political asylum.
Former acting ICE Director John Torres, really appreciate your perspective. Thank you.
My pleasure, Steve. Thank you.
Attorney General Pam Bondi suing the state of Maine, this over failure to protect female athletes. Trump administration now threatening to cut off all of Maine's federal funding for public schools.
Today, the Department of Justice is announcing a civil lawsuit against the Maine Department of Education. The state of Maine is discriminating against women by failing to protect women in women's sports. Pretty basic stuff. This is a violation of Title IX. The Department of Justice will not sit by when women are discriminated against in sports. This is about sports. This is also about these young women's personal safety.
At a gathering of governors in February, Trump asked Maine's Governor Janet Mills if her state planned to comply. Mills responding, quote, "We're going to follow the law, sir, and we'll see you in court." The Department of Agriculture notifying Maine on April 2nd that it was freezing school lunch funding, citing violations of Title IX. The federal law prohibits sex-based discrimination at educational institutions that receive federal funding. And in the United Kingdom, Britain's highest court ruling that only biological women meet the legal definition of a woman. The landmark decision confirming that women's services can exclude men who identify as women. NTD's international correspondent Malcolm Hudson has more from London.
Britain's Supreme Court has ruled that transgender women, that's men who identify as women, are not legally women. This case is the culmination of a long-running legal battle between a women's campaign group and the Scottish Government over the definition of the term woman. Here is Lord Hodge with the ruling.
The unanimous decision of this court is that the terms woman and sex in the Equality Act 2010 refer to a biological woman and biological sex.
A Gender Recognition Certificate, or GRC, is a formal document giving legal recognition of someone's new gender. This ruling means men who obtain a GRC saying that they are female cannot be treated legally as women. Campaign group For Women Scotland originally took legal action against the Scottish Government after it issued guidance saying a man with a GRC was legally a woman. The matter first came to court in 2022.
We thought we were going to see rights for women rolled back, and today the judges have said what we always believed to be the case, that women are protected by their biological sex, that sex is real, and that women can now feel safe.
The decision confirms that single-sex spaces for women, such as changing rooms, refuges, hospital wards and women's sports, can exclude men who identify as women. A British government spokesperson welcomed the ruling as bringing clarity and said single-sex spaces are protected in law and will always be protected by this government. Former Scottish Nationalist Party politician Joanna Cherry said the British government and the Scottish regional government must make sure public policy changes.
The public and private sector have been acting as though we had self-identification of sex in the United Kingdom, and now we know that's not the case, and we also know that it's not the case that a man becomes a woman simply by having a piece of paper.
The Scottish government said it accepts the ruling, adding that protecting the rights of all will inform its response. The ruling is already beginning to have an impact. NHS England currently allows trans women into women's spaces. It said it will now consider the ruling when it updates guidance for female single-sex hospital wards. Britain's Equality and Human Rights Commission also said it will rewrite its code of practice. The Supreme Court said people who identify as transgender would not be disadvantaged by its decision, saying the Equality Act still affords them protection against discrimination or harassment. The 88-page ruling also said that under the Equality Act 2010, the concept of sex is binary. Malcolm Hudson, NTD News, London.
And right now, President Trump is hosting a prayer dinner for Easter at the White House. Here's a live look into the White House.
lost her incredible daughter, and her daughter's looking down on Patty today. This was some day for you, and we appreciate it, Patty, and we're all with you 100%. And you are indeed an angel mom. Thank you very much. And a very special thanks to Charles Billingsley for the magnificent performance. Thank you, Charles. That was very good. Nearly 2,000 years ago, during the sacred week, the living Son of God entered Jerusalem in triumph. Soon after, the Savior of mankind, who brought truth and light into the world, was betrayed, arrested, and tried, beaten, and nailed to a cross and crucified. For our sake, he gave up his life, and as the very great Reverend Billy Graham once said, God proved his love on the cross when Christ hung and bled and died. It was God saying to the world, I love you. Those are beautiful words from a great man, Franklin, right? A great man, Franklin's incredible father. I went to Yankee Stadium with my father many years ago to watch your father. And you think we have big crowds today? It was some crowd. Never forget it. So thank you very much, and thank you for being here, Franklin, very much. 3 days, your father would be very proud of you, by the way. Incredible job. 3 days later, Christ's followers found the empty tomb. Jesus had defeated darkness and death and promised new life to all of humankind. And that's what we celebrate each year at Easter as we joyfully proclaim on Sunday, He is risen. The death and resurrection of Jesus are the essence of the Christian faith. Whether rich or poor, healthy or sick, young or old, or in times of peace or war, Christians everywhere find solace and hope in the knowledge that Christ died for them and that they could be united with Him in heaven. And that's what we want. That's what we all want. The miracles of Holy Week set in motion a transformation in human existence. Countless millions of Americans have been moved by Christ's example to heal the sick, defend their families, lift up their communities, and make our country stronger, better, and greater than ever before. With God's grace over these past 3 months, and we have had a great 3 months. They say maybe the best 3 months ever for a president and an administration. It was really great. We have fantastic people, and they're people that believe like you do. But we've achieved more than most administrations, they've been saying, do in 4 years or even 8 years, just in a short period of time. And I think there's a whole new spirit in our country, and I think there's a whole new respect for our country. Our country was not respected 5 months ago, 6 months ago, although I think November 5th did a lot to get that respect, Franklin. I think it was a big day. I hope it's going to go down as one of the most important days in the history of our country, November 5th. We're restoring our prosperity, securing our borders. We're rebuilding the U.S. military. I did it once, now I'm going to do it again, and even more so. We're standing up for a persecuted Christian and so many Christians that have been persecuted all over the world. So horrible what's happened. And defending religious liberty. We had nobody fighting for our Christians in other parts of the world that were being so incredibly destroyed, killed, injured, hurt, but they died. So many died. You wouldn't think that could happen in this time, in this sort of modern time. I proudly created the White House Faith Office and a brand new DOJ task force to eradicate anti-Christian bias. And there is anti-Christian. You don't hear about that very much, but there is anti-Christian bias. We're stopping the radical indoctrination in our schools and supporting school choice. And we're going to be moving our education department and various educational departments down to the states where they belong. We spend more money per pupil than any country in the world, and we don't get the answer. We are in the lower tier of 40 nations, the 40 nations that they rate. And I think when we do this, it's going to make a tremendous difference. Think of it, we spend more per pupil than any country in the world, and yet it's Denmark and Norway, Sweden, even China does very well in the top 10, and so we can't blame it on size. We're big, but China is really big, and we're going to be there. We're going to be there soon when the states run their education department instead of some bureaucrat in Washington. It's going to make a very big, I think it's going to make a very big difference. And I also, and this was a very easy one for me, I guess some people still fight it because I saw on television today a Democrat congressman fighting so hard. I banned men from women's sports. Seems easy. And I signed an executive order making it official and the official policy of the United States that God created two genders, male and female. That's not too difficult. So there's so much to celebrate this Easter. This is really, I hope, going to be one of the great Easters ever, because we have something going that I don't think this country has seen in 100 years. And as we gather with family and friends, we'll not forget the true source of our joy and our strength. America has put our trust in God. It will always be in God we trust. We will never change that. You know, there's a movement to change it. It will not happen. We won't let that happen. Can you imagine a movement to change that? Robert, you're not happy about that when you hear that. Look at him. He's getting angrier and angrier. We can get angry too, can't we, huh? No, it's never going to change. And with God's help, we can overcome every challenge, triumph over every evil, and restore the spirit of faith in the United States for generations to come. We have a very simple slogan, make America great again, and that's exactly what we're doing. We're making America great again, and I like to add that I really believe greater than ever before. So once again, let me wish you all a very joyful and blessed Easter, and I would now like to ask Pastor Jensen Franklin, a supporter right from day one, he's been here, I think, Paula, from the first moment that we started, and who would have known that it was going to turn out this way, but the support I've had from evangelicals, Christians, and everybody, people of faith, really, has been incredible. I believe it's been unprecedented, actually, by a lot, not just by a little bit. So, Pastor Franklin, if you would, please come up. Thank you very much. Thank you for your support.
Thank you, Mr. President.
I was sitting there and I saw the card they gave me where I was sitting at table 1 from Eastern North Carolina.
And that there was President Trump live at the White House, where the president is addressing an Easter prayer dinner. The annual Easter egg roll will be coming up on Monday. And with the new U.S. tariffs in place, are everyday Americans feeling confident about the future of our economy? And what do they make of the tit-for-tat tariff escalation with the CCP? NTD's Sam Wong was out on the National Mall in D.C. to hear from the folks.
I think he's trying to level the playing field, and I have confidence that, it will work itself out.
I voted for him to take care of the country, and I'm hoping that he's doing the right thing. I hope he's got some kind of a plan, because I think it'll turn out okay.
Yeah, I think tariffs are in a part a good thing, especially if other nations has a tariff or tax against American goods going over there. Then I think we should
equal amount.
China's really screwing us. They're undercutting us with labor, taking manufactured goods, sending them through other countries, bringing them back here, taking our jobs. It's not about me, it's about the country, right?
The United States has helped fund a lot of countries through tariffs. And for anyone to think that it's not fair for us to respond to that at this juncture, I would disagree.
President Trump is temporarily pausing tariffs on all other countries except for China. And what do you think is behind the president's strategy here? What does it say about his priority?
I think by him pausing the tariffs, it's prompted the other countries to kind of think about what he's capable of doing.
They've been taking from us too long, and he's putting his foot down, and I'm proud of him.
In Michigan, we happen to have an uncle who has
like a huge amount of pigs. I don't know what you call that.
Farming operation.
And like huge. And he's in business with a slaughterhouse with a couple other men. They were losing, when they first did the tariffs against China a few years back, he was losing $1 million a month. And he said it was still the right thing because we need to equal things out.
I take an example of what's happening now. China just took away the minerals for us and other countries. Right now they're currently building up their military bigger than us. Why? Why do you think they want to become a world power? They essentially are becoming a world power. They're going to be taking over Taiwan eventually unless we do something. If we don't stop it, they take over Taiwan. It's a defensive position in that part of the world.
We have a significant trade deficit with China. They have made a lot of money from the United States. And it's time we step up and say, okay, let's be fair.
Coming up, a federal judge threatening criminal prosecution over the deportation of Venezuelan immigrants, saying there's probable cause to find officials in contempt of court, while the Trump administration is pushing back. And welcome back to the Capitol Report. I'm Steve Lance. A federal judge telling the Trump administration that he could find them in contempt of court. The White House planning to appeal. NTD's legal correspondent Arlene Richards explains the case.
Federal Judge James Boasberg said in a court order on Wednesday that he believes the Trump administration violated his order to turn around planes carrying illegal Venezuelan immigrants to an El Salvador prison. He said there was probable cause to find that government officials were in contempt of court, and unless they cured the problem by returning the immigrants to the U.S., he would refer the matter for criminal prosecution. In mid-March, Boasberg blocked the administration's use of the Alien Enemies Act to deport alleged Venezuelan gang members. At an emergency hearing, he verbally ordered the officials to return the airborne flights to the U.S. The administration has contended in several filings that the flights were already out of U.S. airspace at the time of the order, and that providing any detailed information about the flights would put national security at risk. They also argued that the verbal order wasn't valid and that by the time the written order was published, it was too late. In a 46-page ruling, Boasberg concluded, the court ultimately determines that the government's actions on that day demonstrate a willful disregard for its order, sufficient for the court to conclude that probable cause exists to find the government in criminal contempt. Sky Perryman, one of the attorneys who brought the case before Boasberg, told CNN, the ruling affirms what we have long known. The government's conduct in this case is unlawful and a threat to people and our Constitution. White House Communications Director Stephen Chung said in a social media post, appellate relief. The president is 100% committed to ensuring that terrorists and criminal illegal migrants are no longer a threat to Americans and their communities across the country. Arlene Richards, NTD News.
And to assess former President Biden's first major public address and the Trump administration's Social Security efforts, we're happy to have with us former U.S. Senator Debbie Stabenow. Senator Debbie Stabenow, thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure.
Senator, former President Biden speaking at an event that you are also attending. This was his first major public address since leaving office. You were there. Talk to us about what stood out to you, and did you have a chance to speak to the president? How is he doing?
Well, it's wonderful to be with you, and I did speak to the president. We have worked together ever since I came into the United States Senate in 2001, so he's been a great friend, and I think it was important that he decided that his first major speech be about Social Security, a great American success story, lifting a generation of seniors and people with disabilities out of poverty, the fact that under his administration with the Social Security Commissioner, Martin O'Malley, they actually made it work better for people with disabilities and seniors. And so the fact that he came out and expressed what we're all feeling right now, just the horror of the effort right now to really undermine and make Social Security harder to get, and closing offices and laying off people and going into computer systems. And, we're at a point now where it's very close to having a situation where people, for the first time in its creation in 90 years, may not get their Social Security check. And more than half of Americans rely on that as their major income.
There is a grim reality that you speak of that, essentially the current Social Security model is just not sustainable for the long term. What do you think are some serious reforms that are needed to fix it?
Well, first of all, let me go back and say, what's happening now is not what is needed. Social Security is on solid footing. I believe this is part of an ongoing philosophy that says Social Security should be privatized, that nobody should have public services unless somebody is making money off of it. So from a must standpoint, I think it's have people not trust Social Security, say it's being overrun by illegal immigrants, which they cannot get Social Security checks. I have been around long enough to be involved in multiple debates about privatization. And I think this is another strategy to try and get there.
You also come from a state where there's, a good amount of Republicans. You've worked with Republicans across the aisle throughout your career as well. Where do you see the most realistic opportunities for Democrats and Republicans to sort of come together on Social Security and make meaningful change for the American people?
Well, we need to come together on a bipartisan basis for sure. My whole career has been about working across the aisle, and there are things that need to be done to strengthen Social Security. For instance, if you qualify for disability insurance, right now you have to wait 5 months for that to start. And I've had bipartisan legislation. There's now new legislation, bipartisan legislation that will be introduced based on work that's being done at this conference in Chicago, advocates, ACRD, of folks who want to make it work better. But the idea of finding a way, a no-cost way to change the system so people could get the help they need right away when they're disabled. We certainly could look at the structure right now. Social Security has a cap of income level as to who has to pay in taxes and Social Security. You can change that a little bit. Doesn't hurt anybody, and strengthen Social Security. To me, this is not about an emergency where you have to destroy the system because everything is in trouble. This is a philosophical debate, and it's really a debate about folks who want to get their hands on this money. This is not an entitlement. This is something that when people work, they pay into the system their whole life. And as I said, this lifts a generation of seniors out of poverty right now. They know they have a basis of income when they retire.
Senator, lastly, you've recently left the upper chamber of Congress. We're starting to see a lot of announcements of some of your former colleagues attempting governorships and parting ways. In your home state of Minnesota, the senator there, sitting senator, is going to be leaving as well. What do you make of all of these changes, and how do you think it's going to shake out in your state?
Well, in my state, we are going to have an opportunity to elect another great senator. I believe it will be another Democrat. And as somebody who retired last December because I felt it was time to pass the torch to a new generation, I think it's good. I think giving new people the opportunity, people with new ideas and energy and commitment, the opportunity to be engaged, particularly in the United States Senate. I mean, this is 100 people across the country. That it is an extremely important part of our three branches of government to bring accountability and work hard for folks. I think it's good. I think it's good, and I think we'll see some good people coming in.
Former Senator Debbie Stabenow, really appreciate you joining us. Thank you.
My pleasure.
Coming up, a State Department office tasked with censoring social media posts has been shut down. Secretary of State Marco Rubio saying the censorship targeted everyday Americans. And welcome back to the Capitol Report. The State Department closing an office that was intended to counter foreign terrorist propaganda was later used to censor Americans. This is the latest in a series of cuts and restructuring efforts at the Department of State. NTD's Washington correspondent Jack Bradley has the details.
The best way to counter disinformation is free speech, is to make sure that what's true has as equal or greater opportunity to communicate as what's not true.
Secretary of State Marco Rubio said the State Department just closed a center that aims to combat disinformation, but ended up targeting some Americans. This is the State Department's Global Engagement Center, which Rubio said a few months ago relabeled itself to the Counter Foreign Information Manipulation and Interference. Rubio said the program started over a decade ago to counter foreign terrorist propaganda, but it had turned into a $50 million per year program that censors Americans for voicing their opinions.
American taxpayers, through the State Department, were paying groups to attack Americans and to try to silence the voice of Americans. And there were consequences. These weren't just a label they put on people. Some of these people got deplatformed, they got taken down, they couldn't communicate.
In one instance, the center was part of an initiative called the Election Integrity Partnership, which flagged social media posts that they alleged might contain disinformation. The center separately flagged the accounts of thousands of Americans on Twitter in 2023 and prior, after which many of those accounts were banned.
But I think when people see that there were actually just individual everyday Americans that were deplatformed and for whatever, silenced because somebody associated with this program identified them, I think that's what's really going to be eye-opening to a lot of people.
He announced the move in an interview with Mike Benz, a former State Department official. Benz posted on X that this puts 30 full-time staff on leave and eliminates all 50 full-time staff positions. And this isn't the end of it. Rubio says that his department's working to stand up for free expression in other countries.
But we have instances now in Western countries where people are being arrested. You've seen this. I'm sure you know what I'm talking about.
Absolutely.
People are out there, they put a post and the cop comes knocking on their door. You're going to go to jail for 60 days for posting something online.
Right. Rubio also said that this issue came up during an Oval Office meeting with the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, and that he, along with President Trump and Vice President Vance, raised this issue with multiple foreign leaders during state visits and will continue to do so going forward. Reporting by Jack Bradley, NTD News.
California plans to sue the Trump administration over new tariffs, citing harm to the Golden State. NTD's Christina Corona tells us more about the lawsuit.
Governor Gavin Newsom and Attorney General Rob Bonta are suing the Trump administration over tariffs they say were imposed without proper authority and are now taking that fight to court. Bonta says President Trump misused the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, bypassing Congress to impose steep trade penalties.
We're asking the court to rein in the president, restore to our economy, and uphold the Constitution.
While Congress typically oversees trade policy, it has given presidents some emergency powers. But California officials argue the new tariffs go too far. The tariffs target China, Mexico, and Canada. Bonta says California leads the nation in agricultural exports, bringing in nearly $24 billion last year. He notes the state is also America's top importer and second largest exporter overall.
Over 40% of California's imports come from those three countries, and they're our top three export destinations, buying close to $67 billion in California exports, over one-third of all of our exported goods.
Newsom says the economic impact to the state could be massive. California is the first state to announce legal action over the tariffs. President Trump has not yet responded to the lawsuit. Reporting from the city of El Monte, Christina Corona, NTD News.
And coming up, HHS Secretary RFK Jr. calling new autism data shocking. He says his department will be taking steps to get to the bottom of it. And welcome back. HHS Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. says new data shows that 1 out of 31 8-year-old child in America has autism. He refers to the situation as an epidemic that's only getting worse. NTD correspondent Jason Blair has more.
The ASD prevalence rate in 8-year-olds is now 1 in 31. Shocking.
The CDC just released data on a study done in 2022 among 8-year-old children, and among them, 32.2 per thousand, or 1 in 31, were diagnosed with autism. And this was done among 16 different sites around the U.S., ranging from 9.7 per thousand in a site in Texas, all the way up to 53.1 per thousand at a site in California. And the study also says those with autism spectrum disorder, it was 3.4 times more prevalent among boys than girls.
Overall, the risk for boys of getting an autism diagnosis in this country is now 1 in 20.
At HHS headquarters, Kennedy talked about how much this has changed over the past couple of decades, referencing a study done in North Dakota.
In 1987, out of every 1 million kids, 330 were diagnosed with autism. Today, there are 27,777 for every million.
Secretary Kennedy thinks that there's something that must have changed in the environment that is causing this big spike, which he is calling an epidemic. He says that EPA scientists determined that the epidemic started in 1989, and they want to do some studies to get to the bottom of it. He says that the HHS will be announcing in about 2 or 3 weeks a series of studies looking into possible toxins in the environment, food, water, etc., that could be contributing to this spike in autism.
Why is it so pervasive? Why has it been thrown up against us for so many years? And clearly there are industries. This is coming from an environmental toxin.
Secretary Kennedy was also asked about the relationship between genetics and autism. He says he thinks genetics could make someone more susceptible to ASD. However, he believes that something must have happened in the environment, something must have changed in order to cause a spike that these studies are showing.
The issue that we know is genes don't cause epidemics. You need an environmental toxin. And we're going to look at all the potential culprits.
Reporting in Washington, D.C., Jason Blair, NTD News.
An Army post in Georgia is getting its old name back, Fort Benning. Here's the commanding general of the fort at a ceremony today.
Sergeant Benning's legacy extends far beyond his own actions on that battlefield. He embodies the very spirit we strive to cultivate here at Fort Benning. That spirit, one of dedication, courage, leadership, is reflected here at Fort Benning in our 3 tenets: people, leaders, and transformation.
The Georgia base was established in 1918. It was originally named after Henry L. Benning, a general in the Confederate Army, but the fort became known as Fort Moore back in 2023 under former President Biden. This is part of the effort to remove Confederate names, including from 9 Army posts. In March, Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth changed its name back to Fort Benning. The Pentagon says that the name now honors Army Corporal Fred G. Benning, who served with extraordinary heroism during World War I. That is all we have for you tonight on the Capitol Report. For round-the-clock original coverage, you can visit us at ntd.com/live and download our NTD mobile app. From the nation's capital, I'm Steve Lance. Have a nice evening. See you back here tomorrow.